Chapter 6. Marching Orders. I walked from Azhar University, far away in the old city, through the teeming, broiling streets of Cairo towards the capital's west end. If words like melting pot and kaleidoscope hummed through my brain, it was only because they fitted the scene better than anything else I could think of. Impressions crowded into the mind so fast that they seemed to blur one another until either the heat or the multiplicity of activities dazed me. I had been in Cairo 3 months. I had a fair knowledge of the language, and I could understand, as a Muslim who had lived for years in the West, most of the things that were going on. But I could not get used to them going together like this. It was as if a giant anthill had been invaded by bits and pieces from another kind of life, and the ants were doing all they could to absorb this Western culture, with varying degrees of success. From every cafe of the Musky, 20th century loudspeakers bled passages from the 7th century Quran. In one corner of the huge souk, a tinsmith was hammering a Coca-Cola advertisement into rims for an ox cart wheel. Outside the 1,000-year-old Azhar University, with its air conditioning and antique carpets, stood a long row of dollar-grinning American cars. Even the people in the streets seemed a little thrown out of balance by the impact of Westernism, in spite of the fact that they had known it for centuries. This was shown to quite a remarkable extent by the assorted clothing of the populace. The standard turnout of the workers seemed to be a complete ex-British Army khaki drill uniform, with sandals and a skullcap. The Armenian, Greek, and Coptic shopkeepers seemed to prefer to orientalize themselves and to adopt Arabic names. The swarthy Sudanese from the deep south, complete with fantastic scarrings denoting tribal affiliation, were either immaculately robed in ultra-Arab style or else wearing the latest American-style clothes. This was the East and West. In addition, everywhere was to be seen the profound impact of the rediscovery of ancient Egypt. In spite of the Islamic strictness against pharaonic ways, one saw names, pictures, and even houses which were based upon the culture of ancient dynastic times. As I emerged into the more modern part of town, with its skyscrapers and neon signs, its donkey carts and Cadillacs, its beggars and millionaire cotton men, a crowd watched a group of young men standing at a busy traffic intersection. A number of stunted, unhappy-looking policemen with staves edged forward apprehensively. I stopped to listen to the shouting of the youths. Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Allahu Akbar! Subhanallah wahda! My neighbor shrugged and indicated the police. They dare not touch them, even though they are outlawed members of the Muslim Brotherhood. They are reciting prayers. I moved away as the brothers continued to demonstrate their presence as a unit. God is greatest, God is greatest, God is greatest. Praise be to God the undivided. As I emerged into Sharia Ibrahim Pasha, the streets suddenly seemed to fill with troops. Looking upwards, I saw machine guns being posted on the tops of buildings. I took out my camera and set the exposure dial. It was wrenched out of my hand. The police captain asked to see my passport. Stand here. I will give you your camera back in a few minutes. What is wrong? I am a friend of Egypt on my way to Mecca. I don't want to photograph anything secret, but what is going on? I cannot tell you. In any case, you cannot move for the next half hour. All traffic must come to a standstill. If you wait here, you will see something interesting. More and more troops. They formed up in 2 lines, facing one another on each side of the avenue. Crowds began to collect and were marshalled by the police. A radio van crawled through the silenced street, broadcasting the national anthem. After about an hour's wait in that burning heat, pressed against unhygienic bodies, with another bunch of brethren chanting, "No man is better than another man in the sight of God, save him who is more pious, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad, I realized that King Farouk was about to pass this way. The man standing next but one to me was marched off under arrest for calling Farouk a son of a camel. He was screaming and begging for mercy. Nobody seemed particularly enthusiastic about the sovereign, but most were a little more discreet. Then klaxon horns sounded, one after another, far away down the street. Something was approaching. The police and troops stood to attention. Machine guns on rooftops were trained on the crowd. As the hooters came nearer and nearer, I saw a glimpse of a blood-red streamlined car with a fat, bespectacled figure in the back and all windows closed, shooting past. I tapped the captain on the arm. "Give me my camera and let me go, please, Colonel." "Sorry, you must wait." Nobody had stirred. I waited. Another series of klaxons, another identical blood-red car, another hunched figure in the back. This happened 5 times, at intervals of about 3 minutes. One of them must have been Farouk, but which? They all had the same number plate. The son of a string of pearls must have been reading about the fabulous Harun al-Rashid, who slept in a different bed every night. The Muslim brothers behind me were chanting, "The Muslims are one hand, like unto bricks in a wall. All are important, but none is more important than the other." I got my camera back and carried on my weary way. A crowded tram, carrying so many people that its very outlines seemed obscured, came clanging towards me. I got a shot of it as it passed. By now I was not in a very good temper, so when the camera was snatched out of my hand by a zoot-suited youth wearing sunglasses, I grabbed his spectacles and ground them underfoot. "Son of a dog, accursed thief, give me my camera and I may decide not to crush thee like a worm." Immediately he calmed down. "I am a student. You are a foreigner. I do not like to see things which are shameful to our country being photographed. Forgive me, don't hurt me." Unfortunately, I come from rather easily inflamed Afghan stock, so I berated him thoroughly for about 3 minutes. I told him that I could not see any shame in having overcrowded trams, that I didn't like the look of his face, that I hoped that he was as active in doing something constructive for his country as he was in annoying foreigners. In any case, it was not his country any more than mine. I was a Muslim, and Muslim lands belong to the Muslims equally. This always has effect, because it is an argument based upon the pan-Islamic concept of Islam and the sayings of Muhammad. He slunk away. Under other circumstances I might have made a friend of him. I made a mental note to try conciliation before aggression in future. I mention this instance because it is typical of many such happenings that I experienced almost daily in Egypt. There is an immense amount of vitality in the younger Egyptians, but they do not seem to know where, if anywhere, they are going. For this reason, they are very divided among themselves, and united only by the fact that the majority are members of the Muslim faith. They are often most sincere, many are extremely likable, but they derive their experience of life and politics second-hand from those clever books, full of ingenious arguments which are written by the tongue-in-the-cheek politicians, or translated from English and French. These are typical questions that I was asked at a meeting of Egyptian students which I addressed. 1. What is foam? It says in the holy writings that something ephemeral is like unto foam. It gathers upon water and has being, yet it disappears and has no further existence. What, then, is it? 2. Would you advise me to stay in Egypt and look after my family, or journey to Europe and seek military training to prepare myself for the struggle against the unbelievers? 3. How can we train the West in Islamic civilization? 4. Do you not believe that unity in the Middle East can only be achieved when one country makes a start? How can one country start this campaign for unity with all the others? And will it not be necessary to extirpate all existing vested interests before we can go ahead? I kept a note of these questions as a sort of miniature cross-section of thought among young students, because this was the type of query that continually cropped up. All these thoughts were in my mind as I arrived at the hotel where the Saudi Arabian delegation to the Arab League session was entrenched. As I entered the immense and luxury-filled foyer, I tried to readjust my thoughts to Mecca and the problem of getting there, taking pictures and getting out after performing the pilgrimage. The main lounge was a brilliant scene, reminiscent of great diplomatic occasions in pre-war Europe. Attachés, members of the Arab Legion, immaculate secretaries and delegates sat with their ladies or in apparent conference at the flower-decked tables. I knew that Prince Faisal, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Saudi Arabia, was there, and made my way boldly up to the frock-coated head porter. "Please send my card up to His Royal Highness of Saudi Arabia." I took a seat, and wondered whether the proud Wahhabi would see me. Something which complicated my visit to the Arabian Peninsula was the fact that my family was reputed not to be too popular there. In the first place, a totally incorrect rumour had it that my father had been on the side of certain Indian troublemakers who had challenged King Ibn Saud in the 1920s. In actual fact, he had used every weapon in his power to overcome them, and had eventually succeeded. More important, perhaps, was the fact that we trace our direct descent from the Caliph Musa Qasim of the Prophet's family. And this family, the Hashemites, were not popular with the Wahhabi Arabians because it was thought that some of them might claim suzerainty of Arabia as their historical right. King Abdullah of Jordan was thus a kinsman of ours and a close friend. It was stated that he and the aging King Ibn Saud were enemies. Saudis said that this was because the Hashemites were friends of the British puppets even. Hashemites claimed the estrangement to be due to the fact that the Saudis had replaced the lawful Hashemite ruler of the Hijaz. For this reason, I had been warned not to style myself by my title, which betrayed my descent from Muhammad. But I remembered that Prince Faisal and his father Saud knew my father and hoped for the best. In any case, it would not be too easy to refuse anyone access to the holy city if he were a bona fide Muslim on a pilgrimage. 5 or 10 minutes had passed. A tall figure dressed in Arabian robes hovered at my elbow. "Syed Edris, please follow me." As soon as we got out of the lift, I was almost pushed through a guarded door. Inside the room, drawn up in the traditional circle of chairs which is the court of an emir, were the Saudi delegation. I made my way to the centre of the group, to the commanding figure of Emir Faisal in his royal headdress of gold thread circlets and white summer robe. As I approached, he rose and smiled. People have said that he is a stern man with a very high idea of the niceties of Arab social procedure. I saw him as the very archetype of an aristocratic Arab. Tall, slim, hawk-nosed and proud, he had that strange magnetism which I was to see again in his father, the warrior King Ibn Saud, who had conquered the entire land of Arabia for the Wahhabite dynasty. He looked surprisingly young, younger than he had seemed when I met him as a child 20 years before. On either side, respectfully silent, were the ambassador in Cairo, the ambassador from London, and other celebrities. I kissed Faisal's hand. At this moment there was nearly a contretemps. I had forgotten that my camera was slung in its leather case under my armpit. As I bent forward, it slipped and swung down, very much like a shoulder holster for something more dangerous. There was a distinct gasp from some of the company, but Faisal is a man of iron nerve. He merely smiled and asked me how I was. As I sat beside him, he asked me the reasons for my coming thus far, where I proposed to go afterwards, and questions of this kind. I told him that I was a pilgrim, that I proposed to visit the holy city, and that I would very much welcome the opportunity of presenting my respects to his distinguished father, who knew my own father. He turned to the Saudi ambassador in Cairo. "The Syed is our guest. You will be able to make all the arrangements, O Sheikh?" The ambassador bowed. I thanked the emir and withdrew. I was on my way to Saudi Arabia. The following day I had my passport visaed and inscribed by the Saudi Arabian embassy by order of the Emir Faisal, Foreign Minister of Saudi Arabia, Viceroy of the Hejaz. Hospitality among the Arabs is fabled for its magnificence. It was good to see that the Wahhabis, stern Puritans though they are, were true inheritors of that wonderful tradition. I had only to book my passage.